More now from my interview with former Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. As I've shown you already this week, President Bush took his focus off Osama bin Laden only 5 months after 9/11.
Deep in my heart, I know the man's on the run if he's alive at all. And who knows if he's hiding in some cave or not. I don't know where he is. Nor, I just don't spend that much time on him. I truly am not that concerned about him.
The Bush focus shifted to Iraq, and as we all now know, mistakes were made. Huge mistakes.
It became boilerplate in the speeches. September the 11th taught us a lesson I will never forget, and America must never forget. America must confront threats before they fully materialize. My administration looked at the facts and the history and looked at the intelligence in Iraq, and we saw a threat. He's clearly saying that September 11th is the reason he looked at Iraq differently and saw a threat there.
Yeah, are you surprised by that?
Yes.
Because Iraq had nothing to do with September 11th.
After September 11th, of course you look at threats differently. Your country's just been attacked. You know that you cannot allow threats to materialize. Do you know how many times I've been asked...
But there was nothing in the threat that Iraq presented that was in any way related to us on September 11th.
We can end this interview right now if you don't want me to finish my point. Thank you. If one looks at what happened to us on September 11th, we didn't connect the dots. There was a threat materializing that we didn't respond to. Saddam Hussein had been a threat from the time that he invaded Iran in the late 1980s through the 1991, when in fact he went into Kuwait, dragging us into war. We thought he had reconstituted his weapons of mass destruction. And in a context in which terrorism and weapons of mass destruction was a nexus that we could not allow, we decided that this was a threat that had to be dealt with.
40,000 casualties later in Iraq, 4,400 American military deaths in Iraq later. Would you say that is the single biggest miscalculation that the Bush administration made, that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and must be stopped by those military men who went in there and found no weapons of mass destruction?
Saddam Hussein was a threat. He had used weapons of mass destruction.
But we now know he wasn't a threat.
This was not... Lawrence, are we going to do this with my answers or with your commentary? We had not focused on the fact, you have not focused on the fact, that Saddam Hussein had been a threat to the United States of America, to the Middle East, since he invaded Iran. Now, we made the wrong call then, and we supported him against Iran. He then became a more monstrous threat. After 1991, shooting at our aircraft in the no-fly zone that was supposed to be keeping his Air Force on the ground, trying to reconstitute his weapons of mass destruction, breaking out of the sanctions through the scandalous oil for food program. Yes, he was a threat. With or without mature weapons of mass destruction, he was a threat. And nothing of value is ever won without sacrifice. Of course, the lives lost will never be brought back. But in Iraq, that is not a threat to invade its neighbors, not a threat to reconstitute its weapons of mass destruction, not a threat to play Palestinian terrorists as suicide bombers. That's going to be a better Iraq and a better Middle East. And so, in fact, I think that what we did in Iraq will be demonstrated by history to be an important part, an important pillar of a new Middle East.
Well, I think history demonstrates that Iraq presented absolutely no threat to the United States whatsoever. And
that would be a surprise to the 16 Security Council resolutions that called him a threat to international peace and security.
Using information that was not true.
That would be a surprise. No. That was on the basis of his invasion of Kuwait and the weapons of mass destruction that were found there in 1991. The weapons inspectors who could not do their jobs and so left in 1998. The attack by President Clinton in 1998 to try to bomb those sites. It would be a surprise to the Kurds who he gassed, and the Iranians who he gassed, and the people in the south of his country who he gassed. It would be a surprise to the CIA that considered him a massive threat to to international peace and security.
I think he was a threat to Kuwait. I think he was a threat to the Kurds.
You know,
I do not think he was a threat to New Yorkers. Do you think he was a threat to New Yorkers?
You obviously have a very different view than the UN Security Council.
You obviously have a very different view. To New Yorkers
you obviously have a very different. You obviously have a very different view than those people who were flying the no-fly zones, like the soldier who's in my class at Stanford, who was shot at by Saddam Hussein. So you may not view him as a threat. Most of the world did.